Welcome once again to Fantasy Fiction Focus. We're here today with Mark David Smith, who is the author of Caravaggio, Signed in Blood, which, despite the grim title and gory details, it's actually for children, isn't it, this book? So how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Nice to chat with you face to face at last.
Yes, it is. It is nice to chat with you as well. Yes. Now, this book is historical fiction for middle grades, young adults thing, but with an actual real character from history. Caravaggio is a real person that actually existed and everything. So can you tell us a little bit about what this book's all about?
Sure. As you say, Caravaggio is a real person. My story, it takes place in 1606, so this is toward the end of Caravaggio's life. And the story begins just before Caravaggio murders somebody in a street brawl. So my main character is a 15-year-old boy who he is falsely accused of murdering his own master, who is kind of an abusive person. And so he's on the run. He's an indentured servant, so he doesn't have family or other kinds of people that he can go to. But he does have this limited connection with Caravaggio. Unfortunately, bad timing being what it is, Caravaggio is in trouble too, and the two of them end up fleeing Rome together. And so the story basically picks up there, and then they have an adventure through Italy as they try to escape from bounty hunters who are after Caravaggio, while at the same time trying to get back to Rome and hopefully to get a pardon for Caravaggio.
Well, now bearing in mind that this is a first book, of course, for you. Now, what was the inspiration for this? What made you suddenly decide, well, I want to go out and write a book and about this particular character and time period?
Well, a few years ago, I was editing an arts journal, and I thought it would be a good idea if I knew something about art, if I'm fielding submissions for an arts journal. So a friend of mine recommended a book called Art, A New History by Paul Johnson. And it's 1,000 pages of art history from cave painting all the way up to modern fashion art. And, you know, it's a fascinating book, but out of all those 1,000 pages, the 5 pages devoted to Caravaggio were the most interesting, most exciting. Because on the one hand, I saw this very sensitive painter, you know, who was painting religious themes and just very dramatic, powerful images that he was creating for the church. But then he would take his church commissions and go out and blow all that money on drinking and partying in the taverns and starting bar fights. And he ended up, as I say, killing somebody in Rome and having to spend the last 5 years of his life on the run. And he did some of his greatest paintings in those 5 years while he was moving from town to town. So I was just really fascinated by this character, and that's what made me want to think about writing a story about him. And I think when I pitched that idea to the publisher also recognized that there really aren't a lot of books written about Caravaggio, or at least there haven't been up until now. He's really becoming popular now, but at that time there weren't certainly not many kids' books.
So have you always been a sort of history buff, interested in different historical periods?
Well, definitely I'm a history buff in the sense that I love history, but I've always thought about history as informing my knowledge of literature. So I did an English degree in university and I did a minor in history, but I always felt like history was sort of the supporting prop for literature as far as I was concerned. So now, having written this, you know, a lot of people make the assumption that it's the other way around, that I'm completely engrossed by history and the writing is sort of second to that, but no.
So it was mostly the Caravaggio character that drew you to this then, so you're not sort of a big fan of the Renaissance or Italian history or anything like that. It was mostly the character that you thought, yes, there's a story here.
Yeah, and actually I had been working on a novel before I started this one that was set in modern day, but it had a similar kind of relationship between a younger boy and an older sort of mentor figure. That story never ended up really getting off the ground, but those ideas really transferred to this. And I think that's the key with historical fiction that sometimes people get wrong. You know, they think that you write a historical fiction novel in order to portray a period, whereas what I would say about it is that you're still trying to tell a character's story. You're trying to relate to characters. You're putting them in a particular setting that gives a certain set of circumstances, but you're really not trying to tell an old story. You're trying to tell a modern story just set in an old place.
But research, obviously, very important for this. I mean, research is, for any historical fiction story, is very important. You've got to get your facts straight and everything. So you did a lot of that, I would imagine, for this particular novel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it took 4 years for me to write the first draft, keeping in mind I'm a teacher by day, and so, you know, I don't have a lot of time to do that. But it took a long time, a lot of books, a lot of internet research, a lot of times at the library, emailing various people and trying to get them to give me free information, which is sometimes hard. Yeah, the research is important for a number of reasons. Number one, I mean, the research sometimes informs the plot. When I look at the things they used or the ways that they lived, sometimes that opens up a plot possibility for a way that my characters can move around in that world. Secondly, of course, anybody that reads it, you know, there's always somebody out there that's going to know more about your period than you. So you've got to satisfy those people. At the very least, and yeah, you know, it's important to get all that correct. Otherwise, you kind of ruin the believability for those people that really care about the period.
Yeah, I know that some people might think that because it's a children's book, just like they think, oh, children's books are easier to write because they're shorter or whatever. Some people might say that you don't have to do all that research in such detail if it's for children. Is that true?
Well, it's not true for a couple of reasons. You know, first of all, you write a children's book, but as you well know, most children aren't buying their own books. So it's parents and adults and librarians who are buying those books, and so they're the sort of first line of defense that you have to get past. And if they don't think it's good, then the kids aren't going to see it. So you have to satisfy them for that reason. And the other thing is, why would you not? Why would you bother setting a book in a historical period if you weren't planning to make it authentic? If you want to do that, write in a period that you do know about, maybe modern day, or put it in the future. But if you're going to decide to do historical fiction, then you know you're satisfying all the historians plus the storytellers, the librarians. Everybody's got to believe this story. Hopefully, too, you're going to reveal something about the period that isn't common knowledge, that people don't know already, and that's going to be part of the excitement for them. They want to discover things about that period.
So did you learn some new things about this early 17th century and the general sort of late Renaissance period in Italy?
Oh, well, gosh, I wouldn't even know where to start. You know, for me, when it comes to researching for historical fiction, it's always the little details, the things that you think probably most people don't know. The things they know, you don't need to tell them. But little things like it was common practice for men to wear a metal toothpick around their neck underneath their shirts. And they just wore this around everywhere they went so that whenever they had something to eat, they could just pull it out and pick at their teeth. I found that interesting. You know, little customs and things that people would do. I remember there's some handbook I read. It was an etiquette handbook for Renaissance men. And it gave explicit instructions that once you blow your nose, it's improper for you to then open your napkin up and look at it. Apparently, this was a problem.
Well, no, I found out the same thing. I was a historian by education and things, but I did 2 medieval books, and I found that I learned lots of things about the medieval period that I'd either forgotten or wasn't aware of, and it's a fascinating thing. Sometimes you can do too much research, I think, for these things too. You can get lost in the topic, I suppose, and get too much information. Did you find that was the case, or did you get too involved in the time period?
Yeah, I mean, you can't help yourself. You know, you learn something, it's fascinating, you want to find a way to fit it into the book. And, you know, that's, I think, where having a really helpful editor is important, you know. And so my editor was able to, you know, say, okay, well, this is good. This, you know, helps the story. This is just you showing off that you know something. Let's cut that. And yeah, you know, I trusted them with that. There were lots of things that I enjoyed and I liked that didn't end up making it into the book, but then the story becomes tighter as as that happens. So it's worth it to do that. It's worth it to have that extra set of eyes, because yeah, we do kind of get caught up in our own pride, I guess, about our research. So
now you, of course, are in Vancouver, in the Vancouver area, and the publisher is in the same area. So was that an advantage to you, do you think, to be able to work closely with the publisher and editors and things who were in the same location? Because most people don't have that advantage. Usually they're it's all by email or whatever.
Oh yeah, I think it's a huge advantage. So the publisher is Tradewind Books, and I know you're familiar with Tradewind, and they're just down in Granville Island. And the way this process even started for me was through that personal connection. I didn't mail a manuscript to them in an envelope. I began by taking a workshop with Mike Cates, the publisher at Tradewind, and I got to know him that way. And then through that process, I was able to pitch that story and work with him on that. He encouraged me to, bring him various chapters as I finished them, and I would come and I'd read them to some of the classes that he was teaching just to get feedback. And it was very encouraging, a very helpful process. And if I were mailing this to, who knows where, I wouldn't have that encouragement or that connection to really probably see it through.
So network, although she was with the publisher rather than other writers, networking and being part of the greater writing community, that's an important thing, you think?
Oh, absolutely. I confess that I've really struggled to maintain like a writer's group. I've often tried to connect with other people, but I don't know what it's like for you out in Calgary, but I find here in Vancouver that all the people that I've tried to connect with, they're often too busy to meet regularly, or the people that do meet regularly, I can't meet with them because of my commitments, with my kids or their activities, and it is hard to sort of maintain that connection. But I've been able to do it here and there, and when I have had those connections, it's been good. I made one friend named Ian Davies who ended up working with me on my first draft, and he was kind of my first set of eyes to pass it by. And there were some teachers that we started a little teacher writing group for a few months, and again one person and I kind of kept at it, and I got lots of feedback from her, and so those kinds of things are really helpful. And then joining groups, like now that I've published this, I've joined Quill, which is Children's Writers and Illustrators of BC, and that group is really, really helpful, just in terms of passing information, different things about new rules about publishing or about royalties or other kinds of laws that change. And there's just lots of opportunities get presented, and yeah, having that community is super important. So
now, you are a teacher by profession, of course. So now, but at high school, rather than the books for younger than high school, of course. So have you always wanted to be a writer, or did you always have this, this great ambition to produce a novel, or was this a more recent thing?
Yeah, I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I never really knew what I wanted to write. And so, I've tried lots of different things. This is the most success I've had is with this. I think like all romantic young men, I fancied myself a poet when I was in university. And so I wrote lots of poetry, and I've written some different Bible study type devotional things that I sent off, and I had a few of those published in little there's a publication called Our Daily Bread, and I had a couple in there, and I had a little gig with a local newspaper doing a little word study column. I did that for 6 months, and I never really knew quite where my writing was going to take me, and in fact, when I first connected with Tradewind, it was because I was trying to write a picture book, and you know very well picture books are very hard to get published, so I still have not found any success with that. But I've got this novel, and so now I feel like, well, good, I can do this, so I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, well, so obviously you are obviously full-time teaching everything, but I know that from your website you've actually done had found a bit of time to do school visits as well at local schools. Yep. And I have seen these pictures, these highly exciting pictures of you sword fighting with young children. Is this a dangerous activity when you're showing them how Caravaggio might have killed people in the street? I mean, it seems a bit risky to me.
Well, for one thing, I have to tell you, that's like the highlight of the whole visit is when we do the sword fighting. So the kids don't mind. No, I was saying earlier that I think I'm the one that's in danger because they're less predictable than I am. And really, you know, I don't know. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know anything about sword fighting. I took a lesson with a sword fighting school we have here in Vancouver called Academy Duello, and they are great. If anybody wants to learn about Western martial arts, they are the best. But what I did learn from them is I learned about footwork, like how you place your feet, how you hold your body. I learned about hand positions and sort of what you're trying to do with the sword. And my research is all how do I write this? And so it's limited. My experience as a sword fighter is nil. So I have to just know enough to make it believable for my audience. And the director of that school, his name is Devin Borman, he told me something that I thought was really key, and that is he said, you can never write a sword fight that is going to be more exciting than actually doing it. So don't try. That was good advice for me. Just give enough to let a person's imagination fill in the gaps, but don't try to recreate the experience because you can't.
So you're doing this at the schools, and you obviously, I'm assuming you're talking about the time period and explaining what the setting behind the book really is what you're up to there. So now, are you doing any? Is there a sequel? I mean, Caravaggio obviously had a short life, and he's been dead for some time now. But I mean, are you thinking of a sequel or any other books in the same sort of vein?
Well, I have an idea for a sequel. I haven't had a chance to pitch it yet. And part of my contract with Tradewind is that if, like any sequels, they have right of first refusal. So I haven't had a chance to pitch it to them, but I did just come up with an idea for a sequel. I wasn't really sure what to do because, 2 years after my story ends, Caravaggio dies, and I don't know if I want a story about him dying necessarily, but I do have an idea. Like I say, I haven't pitched that. In the meantime, I've been working on a different historical novel that's going to be set in the War of 1812 down in Louisiana. So it's a very, very different period, different setting, different characters. Still an adventure story, though. And then I also started work on a basketball story, of all things. So I'm a big basketball nut, and I always was. And somebody suggested that I write a story about basketball just before the holidays, and at first I said no, I wouldn't do that. But I couldn't let it go, and I put together an outline and started 4 chapters. And so yeah, I'm hoping to have that finished by the summer and just start sending that out as well.
Well, sometimes these ideas do take you on an incredible journey. Sometimes you have a wonderful idea that you can't get to grips with. You can't make a start at, and other times you can write a whole book in a few weeks. So yeah. I want to ask you about any other projects, and then so this 1812 one sounds interesting. But now, as you're new to this in terms of at least getting a published book, do you have any tips for people who are just starting out or are wondering, oh my goodness, I'll never have my book published, or I'll never write my book? Any tips for people like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, probably the biggest thing for people to remember is that in the end, the writing has to be good. And so work on the writing. I see a lot of new writers that really concern themselves with their website design or their social media presence or their book cards that they're going to give out. But if the writing isn't good, it won't matter in the end. And so what I say is, if you want to write, take classes in writing. Go and learn from writers. Join writers groups. Practice at your writing. There are tons of books out there. When I was doing my first manuscript, I went to the used bookstore. I got books about writing and editing that I then applied to my own manuscript before I submitted it, and it made my manuscript better. I learned things from those books, and if the writing wasn't good, it wouldn't matter how good the pitch was. They wouldn't have been able to do anything with it. So my advice is focus on the writing, and everything else will kind of follow after.
Well, I think I see that somebody said that in one of these other interviews of the day. Is they said write, tip for writers would be to write. Don't think about writing, just actually do it. And some famous writer said that the first draft's never going to be any good anyway, or words to that effect. And then you're going to learn about writing as you work on the story. But so, do you think it's important to do classes either before you make a start, or at least in the early stages, to give you that basic knowledge?
I think if you're a writer, you're always trying to be a better writer. So if you can take a class, take it. If you can't take a class, find some other way. Like you say, you have to write, but I see a lot of my students who write and write, but they write the same way year after year and they don't improve. So you have to write by looking at writing that's better than yours to try and bring yours up to that level. Look at the sentences. What is that writer doing with that sentence? Can I do that with a sentence of my own, and copy that style to sort of build your repertoire of different sentences, different kinds of paragraphs, and different dialogue that you can then use for your own story.
So your own work has definitely improved then during the process, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, when I look at what I first submitted, there were lots of places where, say, I might have dialogue, but not enough imagery in that scene to really hold it together. And I would be recommended by somebody reading it, oh, why don't you check out this book? And I'd look and I'd find a passage that I liked, and I'd see what they were doing, and I'd say, aha, that's what I need. And I'd put a similar type of paragraph in my writing. And so now I'm learning, oh, okay, well, that's how I do it. I put this much dialogue here, then I'm going to have some description with some imagery that's going to really make it fresh for the reader, and then I can get back into the dialogue. But I have to decide there's something missing in mine, and I got to look for it somewhere else first. It's not just going to magically become better as I write and write and write and write.
Yeah, that's right. So I suppose as a final note, we should ask where can people buy this wonderful novel of yours? Where can they get hold of it? Is it available everywhere in the entire universe?
I believe it is. As long as you've got the ISBN, pretty much anybody can get it. So Chapters in Canada sells it, and of course Amazon, wherever you could get it. It's available in the UK and Australia, and we have distributors there. And it's just coming out in the US next month, February 15th, I think is the date on Amazon. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to having it available there. It'll be through Amazon or through Barnes & Noble. Even local bookstores, wherever you have a local bookstore, if you just bring in the ISBN, they can bring it in. So.
Well, in that case, then there's no excuse for people not to. No excuse at all. Well, thanks a lot for being with us today. It's been great. I'll check out this book myself. I think it sounds very interesting. So thanks for being with us, and we wish you all the best with this, of course, naturally. And the 1812 one sounds interesting too. But all future projects, we wish you all the best with that. So thanks for being with us, and we shall see you around on the circuit, I'm sure.
Thank you, Simon.